This is a short mini lesson on the strategy, the rhetorical strategy of rhetorical shift. And the large part of this presentation was created by Andreas G. and Chris S. And they did an awesome job on this. So by the end of this presentation, you should understand what shift is, how it works, and on an audience, and why an author might choose to use shift. And hopefully you'll be able to spot shift as well. Let's get started. We need to start by understanding a definition of shift. Shift is a major change in the writing or speech from one argument to the next argument, from one type of tone maybe to another tone, from one point to another point, etc. Sometimes when the author moves from the setup to the actual argument. A lot of times on something like an AP rhetorical analysis, you will see a piece where the first part of the writing is maybe getting the audience to agree with them, and then there's a certain shift where once they feel like they have the audience's trust, they start saying their more controversial or debatable ideas to hopefully have won the audience over before they even get to the tricky part. That is also when you can notice a shift. So the way that two bright young gentlemen reworded this is when the author changes what he or she is writing about. That is the most basic definition of a shift. So why does an author or speaker use shift? Because they have to. Good authors make their shifts more difficult to notice so that their audience moves easily between parts of their arguments. If an audience notices that a shift is taking place too easily, it's probably not a very well done shift. The idea is that they're kind of difficult to notice so that your audience isn't going, oh, he's obviously changing here, but that it's a subtle shift. Shifts take the audience where the author wants them to go. That is why an author uses shift. It's difficult to show a good example of shift without showing an entire piece of writing. So our examples here hopefully will just give you an idea about how you might see shift, right? Usually the author walks the audience through very logical or informational ideas at the beginning of the text, and then there will be a shift and they'll be adding their opinion or argument into the mix, okay? You should be able to notice where at the beginning of a piece of writing, by the way, this into is one word in this situation. You should be able to notice in a piece of writing where those shifts takes place, right? If it's all information and kind of agreeable at the first part, and then usually there's a sentence or there's something being said where there's a distinct move, right? Sometimes a shift will come right after a rhetorical question is asked. So if you know what a rhetorical question is, usually you can spot that and see that here comes a shift. So those are all ways you can start to look for and understand shifts. Let's look at a few more examples. Again, it's hard to see an example of shift without reading a whole passage, but this might give you some idea, a very basic idea of what shift feels like, right? Blogging may come to an abrupt halt. Intellectual blogging, that is. Starting today, I am on vacation and will be traveling to Grand Exuba in the Bahamas to enjoy the hospitality of the Four Seasons over yonder. So we have an idea about why this person is going to stop blogging, right? They've said, well, I'm going to stop blogging, right? And then we have this phrase here, intellectual blogging, that is, letting us know there's a change. This actually isn't going to be about the stop in blogging. It's actually going to be about the vacation, right? So that would be a good example of shift at work. Wow, my lines are really crooked. I apologize, right? I don't know what this is a drawing of. Maybe you could figure it out for me. Let's look at another example. Okay, take a look at this one. At the beginning, we have this statement about how they're not going to game as much because they're working on their bass guitar, working on their music, okay? So it gives you an idea about the music, and then there's a shift, by the way, right? Boy and I will be cutting a video on that score soon. So it's shifted from talking about their practice of the music to the fact that they're going to be doing this video. That would be another good example of shift. Okay, this is an AP rhetorical analysis prompt from 2010. Take a look at this prompt, read through it, and see, it's rather short. See if you can notice where the main shift is. There's one main shift in this piece of writing that you could point out. See if you can spot around where that shift takes place. Go ahead and pause the video. Did you catch the shift? Hopefully you did, right? If you look over here in the second paragraph, the second column, you have the first part of this piece of writing that's kind of building up to an idea, kind of complimenting the audience, kind of talking around it, right? And then in this middle paragraph, we see the beginnings of what might be a shift, right? And then very clearly when we see the shift take place. One of the clues that this is a shift right here should have been this word right here, right? But, so all of this here, right? All of this, but, right? We see it there. But what? But here's a shift where the author argues that more needs to be done, that the people hearing it, the two people he was writing to, needed to make some changes, and that's how a shift works, and that's how you should look for a shift. Hopefully you have a better understanding of what a rhetorical shift is and how to spot it. This is a tougher one to spot, but once you get really good at spotting shifts, it's a great thing to write about when you write a rhetorical analysis.